Jack Rafferty, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm very excited. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. You are are you the CEO of,
Uh,
yeah, go on.
no, no, one of the, we kind of have like a joint arrangement where there's a few, there's three of us who are co-directors of
Uh-huh.
the organization LEEP, the Lead Exposure Elimination Project.
Yeah, cool. So you eliminate lead from the environment. Previously, I didn't think it was still in the environment. I thought we had gotten rid of that successfully, but apparently no.
Yeah, yeah, it's a strange sort of thing where like in a lot of countries like Australia and the UK and Canada and America, the vast majority of the problem like has been solved. But yeah, like all over the world, um, there are certain parts of it. So say like lead in gasoline has been completely solved worldwide as of last year. I think Algeria was the last country to phase it out. But there are a number of other different sources as well, be it like paint or spices or batteries or turmeric. Yeah, but yeah, we're at present focused on paint, and there are just a huge amount of countries worldwide at the moment that have no regulation on that whatsoever, and still act as like a route of exposure to children.
Hmm. So how do you guys convince an entire country to get rid of lead paint?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we did in Malawi, we essentially went to Malawi and, like, to be honest, a large amount of it is just in generating data and making sure that governments are aware of what the problem is, what the impacts of the problem are, and that the problem can be fixed quite easily. I think like a lot of governments, like this is true of the Australian government and the American government, are just like very much bandwidth constrained. If there are only so many things, so many problems that they can like have an eye on at one particular time. So if there are like really positive policy wins to be had that look really good from an economic standpoint and from a health standpoint and from a like PR standpoint and all sorts of other things, then like those things just are really clearly things that governments should put through. And this is true like not just of governments like Australia, but also governments all across Africa and Asia. So if we can, yeah, if we can show governments that there are these things that can be done very, very cheaply, if we show them that there is a problem in those countries, because in a lot of countries they just don't have the data to be certain that they do have that problem, and unless they know, and if people don't think there's a problem, then they won't typically regulate around it. But yeah, if we can show them there's a problem, show them that it's easily fixed, and that the returns in terms of like human health and well-being are absolutely massive. Yeah, we found people have been very receptive in yeah, in wanting to push through something really positive for their country.
So you collect the data. Do you collect the data in Malawi saying that there is still lead paint in like on their walls? What kind of data do you collect for them?
Yeah, so the first time we did this, we actually it was about 6 months into the pandemic, and my co-founder Lucia and I we moved to Malawi. In yeah, it was a really incredible time, and we essentially, bless you.
Thank you.
I, yeah, so what we did was like collecting from walls can be a bit more difficult, but what we did was we essentially went to every single paint company in the country and got made a representative sample of got a red, a white, and I think it was a blue paint from every single brand, and then we sent them off to an accredited lab. In, well, first off, we dried the samples in the back room of an Airbnb actually back then. That I and then yeah, sent it on to an accredited lab. Like once the samples were dried, we sent it to an accredited lab in the United States who had the right equipment to be able to yeah, to be able to test it, and then verified what. Or then from that we were able to find out what the levels of lead in paint were, whether there was a problem in Malawi, and yeah,
Hmm, you had an adventure.
yeah,
Huh, wow. Because when I think of, because you're part of the, I guess the Lead Exposure Elimination Project is kind of part of a larger cluster of ideas called EA, right? Effective altruism. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We're like definitely very inspired by EA principles. It's I think it's one reason that we chose lead paint policy from the very start, that we were really looking for like how can we find an intervention that will be like one of the best global health wins possible per dollar,
Mm.
and be like as impactful and cost effective as possible. And yeah, with like yeah, yeah, lead looked like a just extremely promising one. So yeah, it's what we decided to go with.
Why is lead so damaging?
As in like what sort of effects does it have on people?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a number of different effects. It affects like all sorts of different bodily systems. So there are the health effects, and that affects like heart disease, and like all sorts of things like kidney function. In high levels, it can cause death and just like kill on its own and increase or cause mortality. But a huge amount of the disease burden also comes from mental impairment, which is much more of a problem when people are exposed as children. So this comes in like a number of ways. A huge amount of it comes from just loss of general mental ability and IQ loss and things like that, which then that has quite large effects on people's earning capacity through life. And that, like, if people earn significantly less through their life, and that could, like, that has all sorts of like, it causes all sorts of problems as well.
But I imagine with I imagine with general mental impairment, you're going to have things like increased rates of domestic violence. I would assume,
well,
people, yeah.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing that that apart from like, apart from the effects on like on intellect and mental functioning, there's also just a ton of it. There also seem to be a ton of effects on like just emotional inhibition and emotional regulation and things like that. So there are like really powerful correlations of lead paint poisoning and crime, to the extent that like in America, there's it's been estimated that the drop in crime over the last like 30 years has been 90% due to the like that approximately 90% of that can be attributed to the elimination of lead in gasoline. And this,
Wow.
yeah, and it's a trend that's not just seen in America, but it's been seen in the UK, the US, Canada, which all like got rid of one of the major sources of lead 20 or 30 years ago, and is now just starting to be seen. Like people have been making predictions about this for a while. But there's a great book, Lucifer Curves, about this, which is all about the effects of lead poisoning on crime.
What was it called? Lucifer Curves?
Yeah, Lucifer Curves.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was written in, I think, like 2014 or 2015 or something. But it makes a bunch of predictions about that based on the elimination of lead and when that was, we'd expect to see mysterious drops in crime rate in a couple of different Latin American countries in about 2020. And when we were starting this in 2020, I was Googling these countries, and you do see like there's been a mysterious drop in crime, and no one really knows why it is. The politicians must be doing something right. Yeah. And it's just a very positive sign. Yeah.
Well, they did something right 20 years ago, which is excellent.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because the EA movement, I would say, if I could, I'm not super in touch with it, but it's like, it seems to be a lot of figuring out the best bang for your buck in terms of like how can we do the most possible good with the least amount of money, kind of thing. And really, if we want to be helping countries like, I mean, countries in Africa, countries in South America, one of the best things we can do is flick our magic wands and magically make the IQ of the incoming generation like 15 points higher without doing very much at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, yeah, if people can be I don't know if the effect is that strong, but I totally agree that that if people have like some sort of mental impairment, it can be like really, really debilitating. And like one thing that's like pretty widely agreed on in the global health space is that if you want lower income countries to develop and become like really, really well off, then economic growth is a really good way to do that. But it's really hard to maintain that when people are like when there are like massive poverty traps of like if people can't work because of malaria, or they can't work as effectively because like they're mentally impaired due to lead poisoning. And like the economic loss that a lot of these countries see is like really severe. It's been estimated that lead poisoning causes $1 trillion loss to the world economy every single year. And in a lot of countries like Malawi, it's estimated that it causes approximately 6% loss to their GDP, which is absolutely insane. If you look at like the difference between like if you look at how like say like China is a really interesting example of how economic growth has brought like 1 billion people out of poverty in the last like 30 or 40 years. But if you drop China's growth rate by 6%, that just like it just doesn't happen. So if we can kind of like be removing those poverty traps and making sure that those things don't happen, then the thinking is that not only is this like very good from a human welfare perspective and from a mental health perspective and from like an economic perspective, like we empower people to like to be learning things. Well, we empower people to be doing things with their lives that they want to be doing, but also we're kind of working on removing one of those poverty traps, which is making it harder for countries to kind of liberate themselves. Yeah.
You say that it's so it drops by 6% and they wouldn't have that growth, and that's, I assume, because the 6% is kind of compounding on itself, right? It's like compound interest.
Yeah.
It's like
I'm not as sure about that, but I think maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the lead paint thing is I'm kind of wondering why that is such a big deal, because are that many people actually taking paint off the walls and licking it? Like surely dried lead paint can't be that bad for you.
Yeah, I think like definitely not many adults like licking their walls very much. But I think I think what's like there are a few different things that happen. One is like paint over time like steadily deteriorates, and if it turns into like say dust that then just like cakes everything in the home, then it does get onto things and is it's pretty proven that that lead paint in the home leads to significant exposure. The other problem is like it's this really unfortunate thing where like the most important thing is to stop kids being exposed, because the most important effects are the effects on the brain, and especially when the brain is developing. Like if you or I were exposed to lead now, we'd see some health effects on like say our heart and things like that, but our brains would be basically fine. Whereas kids kids' brains are still growing, so it's much more serious. And unfortunately, babies especially have like really strong hand to mouth behavior. So if there are like loose paint chips in the house and things like that, then babies will go for them more than you'd think.
Are there any other common sources of lead that are kind of in our environments? Like maybe not in our environment, although I have heard that like there's just lead in the air in Western countries now because of leaded gas in the past. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, I think probably less so in the air now. Likely still in the soil in certain places.
Soil, yeah.
But I think in developing countries, so there are a few different routes to exposure. One of them is pipes, which like you hear about in say like Flint, Michigan and stuff like that. Most countries like the US and the UK and Australia, we have rules such that you can't roll out new like lead pipes in homes, but there are still like a huge amount of lead piping like all through America, and I'm not sure about Australia, but definitely America.
It's pretty wild. So some Americans are drinking lead water every day.
Yeah, and it's that's a more
country is so fucked up. Jesus Christ.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it is a fundamentally like very difficult problem to solve, in that say like it's very cheap to introduce regulation and say, hey, we can't continue to do this, and then you wipe out like a huge amount of the future burden. But actually just like pulling up the pipes of an entire city is such an expensive endeavor that like even America is really struggling to implement that at the moment. But yeah, other sources, a lot of places will add this is like horrific. But like spices like turmeric, they sell better when they are brighter, and adding lead to turmeric makes it more colorful and sell better. So it's like adding poison to food. But that seems to be quite common in a lot of places, and that's something that I think it's quite likely that we'll be doing some testing on that in the next year or so, and potentially looking at that as well. But yeah, early days.
That sounds somewhat difficult, because I imagine a lot of spice vendors are like mom and pop stores.
Yeah, it's It likely is. We're likely going to be going to have to take a slightly different methodology with our testing on that. I think like the main thing is with paint, typically we can get quite a representative sample of how things are. With turmeric and other spices, it seems it might be less likely that we can get a perfectly representative sample, but we can verify whether there are a large number of spices with that on the market. And I think like verifying, I think it matters less that we know precisely the amount of the market that has it, as much as that we know that this is a significant route to exposure and is causing a significant problem. And then yeah, it's just about like how much information do we need for that to be actionable.
And then you show it, then what you show it to the government, and then they just devise their own campaign to eliminate it.
Well, there are a number of different steps to it. The first thing we'll do is kind of generate the information to show that this is a problem in that country, and then we'll work with like we'll either go in directly or we'll work with an advocate who's either like someone in government who's already passionate about this, or like maybe an NGO partner in that country, or another partner in that country, or we'll go directly. And yeah, we'll speak to the relevant ministry or bureau that handles this. And typically, like people are usually pretty united about this. Like everyone's pretty shocked that kids are being, but like that, yeah, that kids are experiencing lead poisoning in their country. And I think like everyone's pretty on the same page that like that shouldn't happen. So then once that's done, we can kind of work with government and we can assist them in getting regulation through, and regulation that's phrased in the right way that'll actually be that'll actually address everything that it needs to address. And we also work with industry as well to make sure that industry are able to phase out as effectively as possible and don't see too many roadblocks in doing that. I think the easier we can make it for them, then then the easier it is to actually have it put through.
And it's nice. So EA, I was talking to another EA guy like last night at a party that we had, and he was saying that a lot of EA tries to work on projects that are kind of non-partisan, like both political parties want to get behind it, like you know, cutting down on wasted money and things like lead exposure elimination. Like, it is kind of nice because really, if you're a politician and you're eliminating lead, like how good is that for your campaign? You're like, hey, the guys who were before me were poisoning your babies, but I have stopped poisoning your babies. Like that is
exactly. It's like it's a really like very clear like political win, and it's one that like there's no one in the country who would be like, no, we need more of that. And it's just like people are just so united on it, and it's actually just really nice to have an issue where like everyone is kind of on the same page about it. Yeah.
You should go on Twitter and start appearing as the lead exposure elimination guy, because you are going to get some people on Twitter who are anti-lead exposure elimination. I promise you.
I look forward to meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
You monster.
Yeah.
That lead was. We need to keep those other countries down. I don't know. It's going to be something.
It's actually one of the things that's like really positive about this this intervention. Like when like say like we've learned a lot from the anti-tobacco campaigns in the past, because that was obviously like a massive like humanitarian effort that introducing like tobacco taxation and things like that has been like has been quite good in a lot of places, in like or like rules about like say rules such that cigarette companies need to put on statements that that like cigarettes cause cancer and things like that. We're quite lucky in that the tobacco problem had like just a really powerful lobby against it, so it was like very hard to push against big tobacco for a really long time. With lead, as far as we found, at least with paint, there isn't like a big paint that's pushing against us, and most of the companies seem like pretty sympathetic to switching as long as like everyone's needs can be met. So that just also like I think having it be less politically contentious also just makes it like much easier to get traction on these sorts of issues than it might be on things that are either more politicized or might have a strong lobby against.
Do you have a lot of pictures from Malawi? I mean, you're kind of an adventurer. Like you are traveling all around the world to all these exotic countries. Like you're a modern day explorer.
Oh, I'm like very, very flattered by that. It was, yeah, it was a real adventure because at the time, like, I don't know, like you probably remember, like Australia had like closed its borders at the time, so I had to get an exemption to leave, and the airport was like, it was like something out of 28 days later. It was an absolute ghost town. I was the only person there when I was flying out, and then yeah, once I was in Malawi, the Australian borders were closed, so there was no flying back. So I kind of yeah, I was able to kick around in a few different Malawi and Botswana and Zambia for a little while during the pandemic, which was, yeah, it was very, very special. But yeah, we have a bunch of really beautiful photos. I can send you a few later if you want.
Yeah. Do you have a social media or anything? I mean, like a public social media.
I have a Twitter account, but it's like very new. I think I only have a couple of followers, but yeah, we can plug it. I think it's Jack _ wondering, like WOND. But yeah, it's early days. I think I should lean into it more, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a gift and a curse, social media. It's like you kind of gain more social status and power. Like even having, I have like 83 subscribers on this podcast, but like
Yeah.
I can feel that like there's an extra weight to having a podcast and getting to interview all these people. But like, yeah, there's this other side of, the internet has all of these, I mean, there's some people when they have bad days, they just go and comment on other people's videos and say really mean things. And like, there is a real skill to learning to deal with it as well. And I kind of used to recommend that all these different people get social media. And now I'm like, if you decide not to, it's also not a bad idea.
Yeah, I think I'm probably less bothered by that than most people might be. Like I kind of recognize that it's a weird sort of thing, I think, where like for every person that comments negatively on one of your videos, there'll be like 40 people who loved it but just didn't say. And I think it's partly due to selection bias. And also like if someone's commenting negative things on my video, I'm probably not yeah, I probably don't mind about their opinion too much. But I think it is very difficult for a lot of people just because like criticism hits so much harder than praise a lot of the time. Like if you get like 10 positive comments and one negative, it's a negative that sticks. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is quite a powerful thing though. I think especially if we're like really looking to get people inspired about like solving the problem of lead poisoning globally, which we can. I think yeah, having a bit more publicity on it would be really, really positive.
Look, I mean, that's one of my biggest gripes with EA. Okay, for instance, this is my bandwagon right now. There's this EA foundation that's giving away $100,000 for a great blog. Like, and actually they're doing it to 5 different blogs. So $100,000 to the 5 blogs that change the EA paradigm. Do you know about this?
I've heard about this.
I'm going to look it up because I can't remember the name and I really should give them a shout out.
Is it $100,000 to each blog, or is it like
20,000? Each blog gets $100,000. It's wild. Like, okay, but here's my thing. Here's my gripe with this, right? Because, wait, one second. Where the hell is it? Yeah, okay. So it's called effectiveideas.org. And yeah, giving away $100,000 to 5 separate blogs. And your blog doesn't even need to be all about EA. It could just be one post about EA, but it needs to change the EA paradigm. And I have a few gripes with this because like most people don't read blogs, and people in the EA community read blogs. Like super smart people read blogs, but like I think they should be putting money into like TikTok challenges, because really I think what needs to be done is the entire world there needs to be like a mass spreading of these ideas. Like EA, you don't just need super smart people involved. You need people who can campaign to the politicians. Like, hey, there's Malawi still uses lead in their paint. The Australian government should get involved in this. Or like, other countries are using spice or using lead in their spice. The Australian government should go and talk to those countries and do some research, whatever it is, And we need regular people to know about these issues and to know about EA and all the good they're doing. And just because it needs to be in the public consciousness, because it's not right now. EA is not in the public consciousness at all. And they have so many good ideas, and there are so many brilliant people dedicating their time to these projects. And like, it's kind of ridiculous. It shouldn't just be blogs. I don't think at all.
That's a really interesting point. I like, and wasn't where I thought you were going to go with it. I'm like I haven't quite made up my mind on the blog thing, but I think I'm like somewhat sympathetic to it, where I think like I can imagine the expected value of it being quite good. But also I think you're exactly right of like why are we just looking at blogs? And I think this is one of the gaps in the EA movement, where like we almost need more like Instagram influencers on like in EA, just because like I think the movement doesn't naturally attract that set of people. So there's like a set of skills that are being lacked there. And you're exactly right that like it's actually something that we've like tentatively think about doing. I don't know if we'll ever do this, but it's definitely something that like we've considered of like people all across Pakistan use like TikTok and all sorts of different like social media things. And like something like kids being poisoned is like really like quite horrifying, and everyone cares about it, is on the same page about it. And if you want like mass public support for a thing, it seems like a really positive way to do it. And like I totally agree. Like I think you might be onto something there, that kind of leaning into those mediums that more people are on. I could see that being like quite a useful way to publicize a lot of these ideas.
Imagine if like Kim Kardashian pledged 10% of her wealth to Giving What We Can. I mean, how many people would follow in her footsteps and do that and just know what Giving What We Can is? And like what you said about Pakistan, I mean, you could probably pay 10 Pakistani influencers $10,000, like some of the top ones, to talk about lead in the environment, and then immediately all of Pakistan is talking about this.
Yeah. And just what you're saying with like Kim Kardashian, there are some organizations working on something kind of adjacent to this, where I don't know if you know about high impact athletes, but they're an organization that's looking to recruit like just like real like extreme athletes. It was founded by an Olympian, I think. I think they're kind of taking that route of if they can get athletes who are willing to like pledge a percentage of their income and also like have a bit of like a public platform, then that might be a positive way to like get people to be thinking about these all sorts of different ways of changing the world. But I think I think you're really right. Like leaning into other forms of social media in addition to blogs like seems really, really positive to me.
And I think it would help a lot of different gaps. Like I know so many really, really intelligent people who are spending all their time in finance. And there's this concept that like you spend your time in finance, you donate 10% to EA or whatever, and it's fine. But like if it was just maybe higher status to be part of EA, or if everyone just kind of knew about it, like we could potentially make these EA causes like really cool things to do that everyone wanted to do, that people were like, they could get great street cred essentially from doing it. Like yeah,
absolutely. And I think you're right. And I don't know, like I think it naturally is like there are certain parts of it that just are really good. Like if you're working on something that's like really positive for the world, like one thing that we found is people just get really psyched up about that. It's like the world's been like there've been a ton of things that have been pretty bleak about the world the last couple of years, and it's really nice to like a bunch of people I know in EA are doing things that are just extremely positive for the world, and it's really inspiring to see people working on that. And I think the more people we have doing it, the better.
Yeah, I know this girl who's a scriptwriter. She was should I say her name? I guess I will. It'll be fine. Her name's Steph Dawson. She was in the Hunger Games, and she just like, I don't know if I can say this, but she's a great scriptwriter, and she's won these competitions for it and stuff. And she's like, we had this conversation, and she was like, oh yeah, if I can get funding to make a cool movie about like AI, because one of EA's big things is like AI safety. Like AIs will replace jobs and do all these other things that are potentially dangerous. And so she's like, I want to make a movie about AI safety. And I was like, I think actually there's probably room in the AI safety community for like funding a script like that kind of just brings like a blockbuster type feature to the world.
I agree. And there's some precedent for that as well. I don't know if you've seen that video that was making its way around YouTube. I think it's called Slaughterbots. And it was kind of like trying to just make like one of the possible dangerous AI scenarios like very like visible and like for people to kind of understand that. I really recommend like.
What happens in it? Can you give a quick rundown?
It's essentially like it's kind of like a 10-minute Black Mirror episode. where what it is like the military invents these new like small drones that like in order to in order to win a war with like less casualties or something like that. But then it explores like, okay, so what happens once everyone gets that, and what's like the equilibrium we get on, and what happens once that's used as like as part of terrorism, things like that. And it just it kind of unpacks the implications and dangers of that technology becoming one, developed, and two, widespread. And
Is the end result more casualties?
yeah, it's terrifying. It's it's a really interesting yeah, it's a really interesting video. I'd strongly recommend watching it. I don't want to spoil it too much.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Spoiler alert. Yeah, it's interesting. EA is a cool community. We just did this AI safety meetup yesterday where you know all the nerds came and they gave their AI talks, but the real, I don't know, I'm just like, there were some cool ideas and breakdowns about how AI works, but I'm not super interested in that. But we had some really good chats about like, one of the things that struck me was that there were these guys who were doing PhDs in AI and machine learning and like teaching it, and they had this crazy imposter syndrome. Like, there's this guy who he worked for all these like really high-end companies, clearly incredibly intelligent dude. And then he's like, I don't want to take funding from EA to like work on this project for 12 months. And his friend, his buddy had to convince him to take like a median salary, just a regular salary for this incredibly important project that he's doing. And it seems like the smartest people have really, a lot of them have massive cases of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And it is really weird who you find getting imposter syndrome. It's almost like a lot of people I know who are academics, they feel like intellectual imposters as well, which is so strange because they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. And a lot of people who are spending their lives like really trying to do altruistic stuff, they have imposter syndrome about that as well, of like, oh, like, should I be using this money or would it be better spent elsewhere? But I think like a useful frame for this that's been useful for a bunch of people that I know is like I know a lot of other NGO founders who worry about this because like naturally with like startups and NGO startups in general, like a lot of them are going to fail. It's just the nature of the beast. You're going in with like a lot of uncertainty, and like even if you make every decision right, it's possible that things still just like don't pan out. And that's really hard because people think, well, if we're accepting funding for this and it doesn't pan out, then that's like is that wasted? But I think in like it's kind of like an expected value thing where like if 5 things are started and one of them succeeds absolutely massively and it's the next Oxfam, then all 5 of those kind of contribute to that because you don't know which of those 5 are going to work. So it's almost like in expectation, each of those 5 bets is like a really, really positive thing for people to be working on. And like the bottleneck right now is not like, it doesn't seem to be funding. It seems to be we need people working on things that can improve the world. And I think it's a much more constructive mindset for people to be out there trying to build these things. And some of them will work and some of them won't. But all of those are necessary because before we test them, we don't know which ones will. So yeah, I think like no matter which people are working on, and regardless of whether it pans out, the expected value of it is really positive if it means that we get people trying things. It's like the one that works at like, it's kind of like a venture capital model where like venture capitalists will fund like 10 different startups and one of them will make the returns that like make it vastly more worthwhile than what they spent on all of them combined. And yeah, I think it's a similar sort of approach of like thinking about your impact from an expected value standpoint.
That's a really good point, because if you're receiving whatever $50,000, $70,000 a year, which by the way, knowing this guy for 5 minutes, it was like, oh, you could be earning 200,000, like this, no problem, right? But 70,000 a year, your job is to explore the territory. Like you are a feeler in this hand, and you're exploring the territory. And if it doesn't work out, well, that was your job, to explore. Like you were figuring out whether it would work or not, and we figured out it doesn't. It doesn't mean you failed. It just means we have a broad reach. We need to explore many possibilities.
Absolutely. And it's almost necessary if we want to solve these big problems. In that, like, say if we only bet on sure bets, we'd probably get surer bets. But that's a losing strategy in that we get significantly fewer bets overall. And like we wouldn't be making the world nearly as we wouldn't be making the world better nearly as much as we need to. And I don't know, these are urgent problems. We got to solve them. So we need we need more people willing to kind of take those risks like that, I think.
It seemed like so Elliot and I, especially Elliot, I mean, he's just like he's like wherever he goes there is group therapy, it seems like. And so it's amazing. So by the end of the night, you know, we'd all sitting on the couch and we were kind of talking about our feelings. And it did seem like I think, and I don't know if this is true, right? Because I haven't met everyone at EA or whatever, but it actually seems like maybe there's so much altruistic behavior in this community, and there's a lot less time spent on like self-alignment and self-development. Like it's as if almost people don't think they're kind of worthy of self-development and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of room for people just to learn how to feel their emotions.
Yeah, I agree. I think like I think there are like there are multiple different like kind of fields of skills that are worth getting, and EA is like EA is full of like hyper talented people, but I do think there are like some skill sets like we're talking about of like, say, I think like social media is a lacking skill set in EA, and I think you're right that like that kind of like emotional awareness is something that it'd be well, just like internal emotional awareness is something that'd be really good for people to be to be more in tune with in EA.
Yeah, because it's quite the issue. Like for instance, I didn't edit a podcast for like the biggest length of time was like 5 weeks that I put it off, and it was all these things that were going on in my head for all these different reasons. But like I talked to my friend, I had a call with my friend Seth a couple of days ago, a computer genius. The podcast will be up pretty soon, but after the call, he was like, we kind of just dived into it, and he was like, yeah, you should just sit with these emotions. Like we talked about a bunch of stuff, but like he was like, you should sit with these emotions of what you're feeling around the podcast, and like maybe go have a cry about it. All right. And I came back and I started editing, and then like I hadn't realized before, but editing like gives me these, I feel a lot of like, I felt some guilt around like not, you know, doing this podcast quickly enough, and I felt like embarrassment for being on the screen and all these different things. And then but actually the feelings, they're not that bad. Like I can deal with embarrassment actually. If it's just like, if I sit there and I feel the embarrassment and the guilt, I'm not getting stabbed. Like it's okay. But I had spent all this time building it up, and I had done all these different things in order to not feel these feelings that were like, I'm a big girl, I can actually just feel them. But like I think so many people are spending so much of their time ignoring and trying to avoid all these feelings, and it's leading to procrastination and like avoiding trying out for that position, and you know, all these different things.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where we're in this kind of like weird evolutionary arbitrage where like through like most of human history we've been in this scenario where like if you were embarrassed, that was a sign that like the tribe was angry and you don't want to get cast out of the tribe. So like you just shouldn't do like risky things, or you shouldn't like you shouldn't put up a video on YouTube because like if people think badly, whatever. And the internet is such a weird dynamic where like if 1,000 people see your video, probably some people aren't going to like it just because some people don't like anything. And like so but we still like, I think our minds and like our brains still think we're in that like tribe, we're apes in suits. And I think we still think like we still evolve for that like tribe mentality. So we still evolve to like, oh, if one person's angry, that's like 1% of my tribe, I should be upset about that. But I think there's actually like huge value in just recognizing that like the world isn't structured that way anymore. If something's seen by like 10,000 people, like some people are going to be unhappy with it, and that's like, okay, it's not that big a deal. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna starve in the wilderness. And I don't know, I think like it's hard to get past that like evolutionary programming, but like think if we can recognize that the world has changed, and that we're like, and that the stimulus it's giving us is for a world that no longer exists, then we can maybe recognize that we don't need to listen to it as much as we might have needed to once, and it kind of might liberate us a bit to take the risks and do the things that we want to do in order to say publicize an idea, or in order to like do YouTube podcasts and things like that. It's
It's a good point. I never thought about it like that, because if you have a tribe like of 100 people, right, and then one guy starts talking shit about you and he doesn't like it, you can just be like, oh, that's Smelly Joe, nobody likes him, he barely does any work, he's he's an idiot. But on the internet there's 10,000 Smelly Joes commenting on you, and it feels like it's the entire tribe, and it feels like it's all the entire world. But you just don't see what's behind. Wow, that's a good point. I'm slowly going through this process of dealing with YouTube comments. It's a journey.
It's a bit hard too, because like you do get this massive bias as well, in that people who are frustrated are going to comment on absolutely everything. Whereas like if I like a thing, I'll like that thing, but I'd rarely comment on it.
I don't comment on it. Like maybe I'll comment being like, hey, great work, this is awesome. Like,
exactly.
Why would I comment negatively on a YouTube video?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But like, and I don't know, I think that's the other thing, that like the people commenting negatively on YouTube videos, that like probably you should be probably their opinion. You don't want to you don't want it to drive too much, you know?
Yeah. It's in your head though. They're talking and then you read it and it's in your brain, and it's
hard to switch off. Are you ever tempted to just like I think what I'd probably do is I'd just like not read it. I just like tune out. But then maybe that's bad as well, in that you'd like maybe it's good to know what your audience likes.
Yeah, and it's like a battle with the algorithm too, because it's always helpful to like reply and say thanks and continue a conversation or whatever. Which is not, like, I do enjoy continuing a conversation when someone's really smart and they're like giving me good advice, which sometimes they do. But so it's like, I think the trick is to not care so much about the algorithm, and to like just try to make good content, because good content will rise to the top.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
What else are you working on? Are you doing anything else besides LEEP?
Oh man, we're like so busy with LEEP. I'm like barely sleeping. No, I'm like at the moment my main thing is definitely LEEP. We're kind of looking at it's been going really well. So we're looking to kind of grow that to a lot of different countries and see if we can replicate what we did. Well, one, like push through the rest of the stages of what we're doing in Malawi, but also replicate what we've done in Malawi in like a couple dozen other countries.
What other countries?
We're in a bunch of countries right now. We this is such a test if I can rattle them all off. We're in in addition to Malawi, we're in Zimbabwe. We did testing in Botswana, but Botswana was actually lead free, which was really nice.
Great, good job, Botswana.
Zimbabwe, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Pakistan, Bolivia, I think Niger, and Madagascar. And we're working with like really good partners in a bunch of places around there. And I'm also I also in my off time do a bit of like I've published a bit of existential risk research, and there's a couple of different cause areas that I'm kind of quite interested in pushing forward that I think people aren't focusing on enough yet.
What are they?
I think so when people talk about existential risk, there are like 3 or 4 things that like really take most of people's time and intellectual effort. There's like the really popular one in EA is to focus on like AI, and that's like 3 or 4 different sub problems within AI. Then you've also got like nuclear war, which I think is like something just a lot more EAs should be working on. I think it's like much more of an issue than people realize. There's you've got pandemic, which quite clearly is a problem. and then like engineered pandemic of like what do we do about like gain of function research and things like that. But then there's another one which like a lot of AI thinkers like pay lip service to, but which almost no effort has gone into looking for practical solutions for what we can do about it, and that's like risk of like totalitarian lock-in, and risk of like long-term authoritarianism. And like dudes like like Toby Ord, they like write about this in the precipice, but there's almost nobody in EA who's working on it at all, and I think that's really concerning. So I think that's one. And then also like I think one thing that's quite useful to do is to look at new technologies and how they'll be changing the game in terms of existential risk. In that, like, if you look at the existential risks that we currently deal with, most of them are new. Like, we're not that worried about like asteroid strike and like super volcano and stuff. They're like conceivable existential risks, but like the likelihood of them happening in the next like 100 years is just super, super, super low. Like all of our existential risks seem to be new-ish technologies that that we are now having to deal with. Like the problem is that we're creating kind of new technologies that are super dangerous. That we created nuclear weapons, and now we have to deal with not blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons and creating nuclear winter. And we created the technology to create engineered pandemics, and now we just need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I think like at the moment we're quite, the community's been like very reactive, and they've been like, cool, here are like 3 or 4 technologies that are quite dangerous that we need to figure out how to work with, and one technology of AI which isn't here yet but we need to work on. But I think there are 2 things here. One, I think there are plenty of other technologies that we're going to create that or that we could create that could be existentially dangerous. And 2, we're in this scenario where like we keep creating these technologies. So even if we are solving these individual problems, if we keep creating them, it's not that sustainable a solution. So I think like one useful thing to be doing, like that I think more people should be working on in general, is figuring out like, can we direct technology in that, like, can we develop things in a way such that we're not creating the new version of nuclear bombs? And like, or are we just like if we have technological advancement, is it just destined that we that we inevitably create things like that? And I don't think it is. I think this stuff can be directed, and we don't put much thought into it at the moment. And then the second is there's like a specific technology which is currently being developed and is currently like being funded by a bunch of really powerful groups, be it like DARPA, which is like the US's military like research arm. It's also being funded by Facebook, and being funded by like Elon Musk's Neuralink. Is I think brain-computer interfaces are potentially just an extremely dangerous technology.
Yeah, imagine if you hacked everyone's brain.
And well, like there are. This is something that I had a paper published about this recently in the Journal of Future Studies. That I think like one, hacking people's brains is just like seems like a super, like I think I really don't want to happen. But I think like possibly the larger existential risk, because like say like getting hacked is a problem, but it's probably not like a civilization level problem of like it probably won't wipe like it probably won't make it'll be bad for a lot of individuals, and we should make sure it doesn't happen. But like similar to like computer hacking, of like some people's computers get hacked, but it's pretty unlikely that everyone gets their computer hacked. Like but like I do think it's like, yeah, I'm a bit cautious about I'd be a bit cautious about using them, because like I personally very much don't want to get hacked, just because the stakes of my mind getting hacked are so much higher than my computer getting hacked. But I think also it's just this like really, really dangerous technology, in that like one thing Orwell was really grateful for was that the government in 1984 still couldn't detect thought crime. And that like I think like expansion of surveillance has been like a real problem. We've heard about like Edward Snowden and the prison program that America had, that was like I think like the more governments are able to like the more governments are able to kind of find out absolutely everything about their people, and like police, and the more effectively people can police their people, then the more effectively dictatorships can be maintained. And if you can imagine like a North Korea that like can find out what people are thinking, it makes dissent really, really hard. And if people with like brain stimulation technology, which is what people are looking at rolling out with brain computer interfaces, can then reward or punish certain thoughts, then that's like I think really dangerous. And it sounds like very, very sci-fi right now, but like a lot of these things we can already do. A lot of these things we like look very, very like there are promising experiments that show that it's likely that this is possible. And I think it just sets us up on a dangerous equilibrium where like it means that if you're in a dictatorship that can use these technologies, it makes it like much more sustainable to like maintain your dictatorship. And I think it's a dangerous world where if the sustainability and longevity of dictatorships goes up, but like we're in this kind of groovy cycle right now where like occasionally like democracies or occasionally dictatorships like rebel and become democracies, and occasionally democracies collapse and become dictatorships. And like we don't like ideally what we want to happen is we want dictatorships to become democracies as much as possible and democracies to fall as little as possible. And what this seems to do is make it much less likely that democracies will rebel and rise to be a dictatorship, but democracies still fall just because like we haven't figured out a way to make democracies last eternally yet. Like just historically, they they haven't lasted forever, and it doesn't look like a solved problem at the moment. So if like democracies can still fall, but dictatorships last forever, that's a very dangerous equilibrium where just everything might fall into that eventually. And that's something that I think it's at least worth us thinking about. And as far as I can tell, there is basically no one thinking about it.
This is chilling. I when you said the thing about 1984, I just got a chill. Like,
yeah, it's a really massive problem, and as far as I can tell, I'm the only person who's thinking about it. And so it's an idea that I'm kind of trying to publicize that I think as a world we need to take like much more seriously.
Well, and I mean, I'm not super familiar with the brain-computer interfaces, but I assume a country like North Korea could eventually adapt them to do things like control people's muscles, like I mean, control their motor function, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. We can already do things like this, where like people where you can reward and punish certain things and stimulate pain centers in the brain or stimulate reward centers in the brain. And if you can like that, that's already stuff that we can do. And if you combine that with like, it seems like we're getting better and better at figuring out what people are thinking using these technologies. Like we can already and yeah, and I think the combination of those two things is just like super dangerous. It's
what can be done to stop this?
yeah, it's a good question. I think it's been a while since I wrote this paper. I have a whole section on this, but I'm a bit hazy on it because I wrote it a year and a half ago. I think there are a few things. One, I think if people were terrified of it and stigmatized it, then that would make it significantly more likely that as a world we add rules about this, such that say certain kinds of BCIs could be developed. So say like if you want BCIs that can deal with like medical things. So say like there are tons of like really useful uses of BCIs in that like they can be really positive for addressing like Parkinson's or for addressing Alzheimer's and things like that. But I think say like broad use BCIs, I think making laws about that could be an idea. I think also it might just be like it might just be like a kind of a military escalation problem where like in order to address this, we also need to figure out how do we make sure that BCIs can be broken if we need to break them. Because like if like say if a government goes rogue and is implanting its people with BCIs to get them to obey, like is there a way that are there technologies that can kind of like wipe that out? Like would I think thinking about things thinking about how we can more effectively break this technology would possibly be a useful way to do it.
I mean, would something like an EMP work, like an EMP gun?
Yeah, that's something I talk about, and I'm inclined to think yes, just because like the main defenses against EMPs would like they're kind of like you can have kind of Faraday cages and things which block out EMP radiation. But if you do that, then like you wipe out much of the functionality of BCIs as well. But so I'm inclined to think yes, but I'm not sure. But at the moment the problem's in its like really early stages. I've kind of identified that there is a big problem here. And we should be thinking more about it. But I think the solutions are still really early stage. So if anyone wants to be working on this problem and trying to figure out what the solutions are. I think there's probably still like a lot of really fertile ground to be looking for constructive solutions to this. Just because like there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit because no one's thinking about it yet.
I really want to know what Elon Musk thinks about this, because I'm sure he's thought about these ideas before. One time I talked to Aubrey de Grey, and I'm not sure if you know who he is. I actually took it was a podcast I did before I took it down, but I didn't like his response. So Aubrey de Grey is essentially maximizing the human lifespan, and he's a very smart guy. He's a genius. It's just this particular thing I didn't quite agree with. But he said, I said, like, what do we do once we've maximized the human lifespan and people are living 500 years? This is going to cause an issue, like population, all that. And he said, well, it's my job to develop the technology and future people will sort it out, essentially. And maybe that's not his exact words. I think that was the sentiment. Like, we will figure it out as we go. And I don't know if I accept that as like, is that what Elon Musk is doing? Is it just we figure it out as we go? Because I'm
worried that the strategy is like we jump off the cliff and then like build our wings on the way down. And
yeah, it's I mean, and it doesn't make, a part of me always wants to say, just stop making this technology, just stop it. But like, that's obviously not a realistic thing to do.
It's super hard to stop technological development. And it's like, I think, like this is another really interesting question, I think, of is technology inevitable or is there stuff we can do for it? And I think that's something that like that question, it's possible civilization hinges on it. It's a really important question. But I think Elon Musk's rationale is like I disagree with it, but his rationale is that like his funding or his work on Neuralink in the short term is to work on therapeutic medical stuff, but in the long term he wants it to address the AI problem.
Yeah.
In that he said if we can kind of achieve some sort of symbiosis with AI, then that will help us survive.
Even, he said that before. He said, we're going to have artificial intelligence and then we're going to have a human limbic system. And it's like, do you want super intelligent space terrorists? Because that's how we fucking get them. Like, the human limbic system is the emotions. I mean, have you seen the amount of intelligent people? Like, there are flat earthers who have built rocket ships. Let that sink in. They're not fucking stupid.
They're really?
Yeah. The rocket ship exploded and he died, but he made a fucking rocket ship. Like, there was an issue with it, but there are aerospace technologists who are flat earthers. They're not stupid. If you think the solution to solving all of humanity's issues is making us smarter, it's not. I think we've proved that throughout history. Okay, so
hilarious that flat earth is back. I'm like it's such a wild card that I wouldn't 10 years ago.
I love it. They're the best.
But yeah, I also think his rationale doesn't make a lot of sense in that like I think he's generally like very, very well thought out. And I think Tesla Motors and and Solar City are just like,
I am a huge fan of Elon Musk. I fucking love Elon Musk. But like
I think he does like really amazing work and he's probably had more impact on climate change than most people are. But I think this this company is quite dangerous in that so I think like just if you look at the technology, like it makes us smarter in the same way that like iPhones might make us smarter. But if you're talking about like with AI, people are talking about a thing that might be like 10 times smarter than us or 100 times smarter than us, or even just like think faster than us because because messages transfer better through silicon than they do through like the chemistry of our brains, then it's just seems really unlikely that brain computer interfaces will change the game enough to make a dent in that problem at all.
Really?
And yeah, it's like in that like if we're like unless you kind of replace our brains with like fiber optic cables, there's only like so much of a speed we can get to. And I'm like, I just like there just seems to be like a really fundamental natural limit there that brain computer interfaces won't get around.
Okay, because like
I'm quite skeptical of like solving one existential risk by creating another existential risk. I think that's it doesn't. I don't love this strategy. Yeah,
you can only roll the dice so many times.
Yeah, exactly. And ideally, I think like before creating another existential risk, we should probably look for other solutions first. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we can stop progress. But I want to go back to the thing you said about brains and the rate at which we learn, because um, is it something like I have a chip in my brain and I can it knows calculus, and it, like, if I want to do something involving calculus and I don't know calculus, it can't teach me calculus, right? This isn't the Matrix.
Yeah.
Or maybe it could, but it would be like a regular process, maybe a bit sped up, right? So maybe it could, like, I could do a Khan Academy, for instance, in my brain computer interface, but I couldn't immediately download calculus. It would be something like perhaps interacting with, maybe I have a question like, how do I solve this problem? And maybe I can ask the chip, and maybe it can solve it for me, something like that.
Yeah, which is kind of something we can already do with like if I have a question, I can Google it and see what the answer to that question is. Or like go to, if there's an equation I want to solve, I can go to Wolfram Alpha and get them to solve that problem for me. There are a few things that I think like as far as I found, and I did a like pretty exhaustive like look at this or literature review of this. There's like we're nowhere near like the Matrix kind of like Jack in and I know Kung Fu all of a sudden. But like there are things that like could make us better, and that like say like it seems like there are probably quite a few wins to be gained in terms of like making like if you could never lack concentration again, that seems like like productive for people's well-being, or not for people's well-being.
That also sounds like a real fucking problem, because the human brain, I don't think, is meant to be concentrating for every single hour of the day.
That's a really interesting point. And it's like, it's very possible that people that like in the first generation of these, people might be like, yeah, like I can be much more effective by concentrating all the time. And then we just like completely destroy like something that we don't realize.
It's going to be exactly like people who take Ritalin every day and to concentrate, and then they get all the after effects of Ritalin. Like, I mean, it's not going to be any different than a drug. It's going to be stimulating it's going to be stimulating your nerves in the same way a drug does. Not the same way, but similar enough.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, I imagine you get people much more motivated and much like faster reward pathways. I think like,
man, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a lot of people watching porn at work now because they don't have a screen. I think it's going to be a lot of the same stuff as the internet.
That'll happen too. I think it's like, it's the kind of thing where it's like unevenly distributed, where like it's kind of like the internet, you know, like if you use the internet right, it's like an incredibly powerful tool that you can use to like get to know all sorts of people, or learn anything you want. But then a lot of people just like for a lot of people, the internet, like for some people, the internet is like just really net positive and gives them huge opportunities, and for a lot of people it's net negative because it's just distraction all the time. But it's all about how people use it, I guess. Like,
yeah, and the truth is that humanity is kind of pushed along every generation by a small cluster of people. Like, right now, the people influencing the culture and technology, there's a handful of them. Like it's 0.001% of the population or something. It's the people working at DeepMind. It's the people working at Google. It's like the influencers. And realistically, you know, it's people like Elon Musk. I mean, there are other people. We all contribute, and we all contribute to our microenvironment, which is incredibly important. But overall, like, I guess this is going to help very few people do incredible things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, that of like, who makes the world? I go back and forth on this. It's but I agree. It seems like this technology is something that it will be, the benefits of it will be unevenly distributed.
When I said that, I realized how jaded that sounded, actually, because I don't actually believe that in this context. I guess I mean, a single father who stays with his kid and doesn't leave, or a father who gets someone pregnant and decides not to leave, right, makes a massive impact on not only their child, but also statistically the community around them. Like, other kids have a father figure in their lives. So actually doing one action, and even if you're not that good at it, even if you're just okay at it, like being a father, for instance, can potentially change the lives of like 20 kids. Because they can suddenly go to their friend's house and there's a father figure there who's pretty good. You know, maybe he's not perfect, but he's pretty good. And so like, and then those 20 kids have all these other impacts in the world. So it's not like, yeah, it's not like nobody has any impact at all. And that really,
I agree. It's this complex thing where people having small impacts on their community matters, but also like I think there are multiple different ways to think about this, and it's always hard to tell which is more accurate, just because like it's super hard to tease apart why things happened in general. But I think like one lens like that you're talking about is like kind of great man history, where there are people who push things forward, but also like I don't know. I think often this is something that I'm deeply uncertain about. But I think like we have this phrase that great scientists and great whatever stand on the shoulders of giants, and that can be true, and that we do build on the knowledge of the greats. But I think sometimes we also just stand on the shoulder of old men and women who inspired us when we were young and kind of taught us to love the things we love, and who history might not know. But I don't know, I think there might be a bit of a selection bias where with this sort of stuff, the people that get remembered we recognize, and then the people that don't get remembered, so we forget to count them and forget to look at the impact that those people are having. But yeah, it's really hard questions of who makes the world. I think it's incredibly hard to tell.
We don't exist in isolation. Nobody does.
That's right. It's an ecosystem.
I mean, Alexander the Great, a lot of his without Olympias, without his mother, there's no way he would have been who he is. She raised him up, and she was
Totally
famous in Macedonia. She ran the country in many ways, and there was no Alexander the Great without. If she had decided not to be a very good mother, we wouldn't have had him. And
yeah, really.
I think everyone's like May Musk is a fucking hero, yeah.
Absolutely. There's yeah, and I think this happens on you can see that on individual scales, but it happens on societal scales as well, where there's it's hard to tell where certain things come from. I think people often give the boomer generation a lot of flack, and I hear it. I think there's a pretty fair argument for it. But I also think one thing that they did that was really, really good. There's was the boomer generation, as far as I can tell, were the first generation in history to not beat their children. And as far as I can tell, there wasn't there wasn't a Martin Luther King for not beating children. It was I don't know where that came from, but I'm inclined to think
the acid they took. That's my guess.
I don't know. There was this philosopher, I can't remember who it might have been. Yeah, I can't remember who, but they had it was from the 3rd century. They had this beautiful phrase, which was "Give me other mothers, and I'll give you another world." And it might have just been that, I don't know, people just felt things differently for some reason, and things I'm not sure why things changed, but it seemed to be a much more distributed thing rather than being driven by great people. I think probably elements of all these things are true, where I think in general in our culture we think people can't change history and that great people don't exist, and I think they clearly do, just because they have. But I also think it's complex. It's not just great people either. Things can come from a lot of different directions. Yeah.
And terrible people too. I've been thinking about this recently. We say Stalin killed 10 million people. We don't really know, but Stalin didn't kill 10 million people. He didn't go out and shoot them all. Are you fucking crazy? It was everyone who worked under him who decided to be complicit. Every single person. And from this top-down hierarchy. And somehow, humans, we're so gravitated towards living in the shell of something else. So for instance, you work at the bank and you are a bank employee for those 8 hours that you work there every day. Somebody doesn't come up to your cashier or teller booth. I don't know what it's called. I don't go to the bank, but somebody doesn't come up to you and you don't tell them about the crazy night you had last night where you got super drunk with your friends, because that's not what a bank teller does, right? A bank teller says, here's your money, whatever. And if you do that, you're violating the principles of this machine, this giant organism called the bank, which you are part of. A part of your soul is the bank now. And just like Stalin killed 10 million people, well, he just created an organism that everyone else kind of naturally, because humans do this, they became part of. And we're all part of organisms like that. And humans, I don't think of humans as individuals all the time. Like we're more of a cluster of, we're kind of individual cells in some way in a cluster of a larger organism.
Yeah, with the Stalin stuff, it's so difficult too, because like in totalitarian countries, it's like it's so like it's kind of this like weird it's kind of this weird prison where all of the prisoners are also the guards. In that like I spent a while in Cambodia trying to like learn about how the Khmer Rouge thing happened, because it just like an absolute insanity. And everyone I spoke to, it's like I went through interviewing a bunch of really fascinating people, but it was quite harrowing as well.
Are they online, those interviews?
No, this was in Cambodia. I just went there.
Okay.
It really seems to me that it like in a lot of those scenarios, it's like there are a few people kind of gripped by like ideological madness, and then everyone else doesn't want to get killed, so they have to like go along with doing things and police everyone else into doing that, because that's the only way to ensure their safety. And it's just this really dangerous incentive structure that gets people into really scary spots, I think. Yeah.
You were talking about the harms of totalitarianism before as well. You did, right? You mentioned that before. Yeah. How? I mean, is there any theory about how to avoid things like this?
Yeah, so there are multiple different questions here of like, how do we avoid becoming totalitarian and falling into that? And then there's like, what do we do if totalitarian countries exist, and like what defenses do we have to make sure that like if that happens that we can get out of it? I think there are multiple different like levers to push. For a few really good thinkers on this, Tim Snyder is a really amazing he's a historian who focuses a lot on the Holocaust and World War II and tyranny. And he's got some really interesting books that identify the early stages of like authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and what to watch out for there, and how to stop societies from falling into it. I think I can't quite remember the title, but he's got one that's on tyranny. But he's like a few of his books are like really great. Like Black Earth is really amazing, and he's got another one about I'd really recommend anyone interested in learning about this. Tim Snyder's quite good. And then in terms of overthrowing dictatorships, there are like and making sure that like if stuff falls that they can get out. I think there's this really amazing thinker, Gene Sharp, who was he's kind of like, people call him the Machiavelli of nonviolence, and he's he was kind of the main, like he was an Oxford educated PhD, and he was the main political strategist. Well, he essentially came up with the playbook behind the Arab Spring revolutions, and and he's he thinks incredibly rigorously about how to do productive things to prevent totalitarianism and authoritarian governments from sticking around. But it's I'm not sure I'm game to go through a full summary now, but if anyone's interested in digging in, his book Dictatorship to Democracy is absolutely incredible, and everything by Tim Snyder is simultaneously like harrowing and depressing, but also like very, very interesting. Yeah.
What got you into the Lead Exposure Elimination Project originally?
It's a good question. I've been trying to figure out a way to I don't know. I think since I was young, I've been trying to figure out how to do something positive and big for the world, because I don't know. I think there are a lot of problems that need solving, and like we always say like we should think global and act local, but I kind of think we also should think global and act global. So I've been trying to figure out a way to do that for a long time. And I came across this group, Charity Entrepreneurship, who are they're kind of like Y Combinator, which is which, if anyone doesn't know, Y Combinator takes people who want to start startups and kind of gives them a bit of like a bit of funding and support and training, and helps people to helps people to get that going. And these people do that for like NGOs and people who want to do like positive stuff for the world. So I heard about them and got involved, and with their with their advice and support, we've been able to get moving like way faster than we thought we were going to be able to. So yeah, really good.
Wow. So it's like Y Combinator. So do you go through with a group of other charities, and I don't know what Y Combinator does exactly. They do dinners and they teach workshops. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. Where like there'll be, I think about like I think in our year it was about 20 people that went through the program. They picked us out of a few thousand, and then we kind of found other other co-founders through the course of that program, and like some of the most talented people I've ever met. They're just like really wonderful. And then we did a bunch of different like there are a bunch of different there's a bunch of different coursework and like learning about like how do we get registered, and how do we hire well, and how do we do a cost effectiveness analysis, and like all sorts of different things that are useful if you want to be running a impactful charity. And then we did a bunch of training with them and worked with each other a bunch. Found co-founders, and then at the end of the program, they gave us a seed grant for I think ours was $60,000, and that was enough to get us running for the first however long. And it's hard to it's hard to run stuff without that initial support. But if anyone's like interested in kind of like leveraging a really massive like idea and kind of giving a shot at solving a big global problem, then they're a really astounding place to start if people want to get involved.
And you have to be a charity. Is that? I mean, obviously.
Well, no, I actually was just like an individual, and we applied, and they help people out with like ideas and things like that, and with training and all sorts of things. Like mostly it's just like talented individuals who just want to do good stuff for the world, and I think they like people who like have a kind of like EA mindset and care about like effectiveness and things like that. But anyone who's like really enterprising, it's really like it was a really massive opportunity for me, and I think it is for everybody who gets involved. Yeah.
Wow.
And they have a lot of cause areas too. So like we were focused on like say global health stuff, but then there are other people who focus on animal welfare things, and other people who focus on say improving like family planning and women's access to contraception and family planning in the developing world. So like people can plan can control their lives a bit better. There are a bunch of different things that they focus on, but
How do you secure funding for your organization?
Yeah, so I think that depends on like the stage of the organization. So like at the very beginning, we had this grant from Charity Entrepreneurship, and then in our very early days, it's like in your early days, you're kind of just like a pilot program where you're trying to tell, like, we've got this idea for something that we think could be really positive. So how do we tell if this works? And at that point, for us, there were a few like really generous, just like early donors who were they were just like people who were like, hey, I think this is a really good bet for the world, and they wanted to give away like $20,000 or $30,000 to charity or something like that, and they wanted to give it away like really effectively. And I think if people are looking to earn to give, then giving to like really early stage or middle stage charities can be like a really impactful way to do that. So they can't like we were running on like a very, very, very lean budget for our first year or two. And I think they helped us get through that like really early stage while we proved that this was like just an incredibly promising intervention and that it worked. Like those early donations were what allowed us to get change in Malawi, which is absolutely massive. It's going to have like the work in Malawi will mean that there's 215,000 children that don't get lead poisoning, which is absolutely huge. Like dollar per dollar, that's like hugely effective.
So just to give just so we know, how much money worth of donations got you to Malawi to do that? Just so I know, like, a dollar amount.
I think our first year budget was $80,000.
So $80,000, would that be about right? Like,
well, to get the initial progress in Malawi, that was like our first like 4 months as well. So that was probably like $30,000 or $40,000 is what got the initial commitment. But
so the charity donors paid like $40,000 and then saved 215,000 children from brain damage.
Something like that. It's probably a little bit more in that there's going to be ongoing work in Malawi to make sure that it actually pays off. But it does, like, our cost effectiveness analysis for Malawi at the moment looks like it'll be about $14 per disability adjusted life year averted, which is like a lot of the best interventions in the world are about $100 a daily, which is it's really positive to be able to, like, it's a really good sign. And yeah, and we're not the only project like this. There are like a ton of different projects who could change the game in how effective charities can be and how impactful charities can be. And I think like that, like early stage funding, or even like there comes a point where like even in like the second year before foundations are like really taking people seriously, that can be like really impactful as well. And I think it's something that like I think it's something that people earning a gift should like really consider. That like you can make a donation go like so much further by like approaching these like higher risk projects, but also it is higher risk, so it depends if people are happier with the expected value of it. And then since then, with because of the progress we've been able to make, there are a few foundations that have been quite interested in us as well. So we received big grants from Schmidt Futures, which is a big foundation run by Eric Schmidt, who used to be CEO of Google, and FTX Future Fund, which is Sam Bankman-Fried's foundation. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
really
hopefully,
go on.
So hopefully we're just going to be speaking of more of them and seeing if we can grow what we're doing more.
It's inspirational. I mean, you single-handedly propelled this initiative, which ended up with 215,000 Malawi children being saved.
It definitely wasn't single-handedly. Like my co-founder Lucia, like without her, it was definitely a team effort. And our third director Claire, she's also been like just absolutely colossal. It's but yeah, it's, I don't know, it's with a small group of like driven people, it's surprising what you can do.
What are their names?
Lucia Coulter and Claire Donaldson.
What's it? Lucia what?
Coulter.
Oh, like Coulter?
Yeah.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
What are how do you guys work as a team? What's everyone's strength?
Oh yeah, so we've actually been working on this a lot recently, because like in the early days of a charity or a startup, like everyone kind of needs to do like a lot of different things. You really need to be like quite generalisty, just because like there are going to be 100 different jobs to do and someone has to do them. So but we have like kind of earned towards certain areas of responsibility. So like Lucy is she's a Cambridge educated medical doctor, so she's just like she's a really good researcher, like, and anything like research and CA wise, she's got just an astounding mind for all that stuff. And I focus more on like I handle operations, fundraising, hiring. Lou and I do a bit of fundraising together.
You're also the lead adventurer.
I like that description. And then Claire handles a bunch of our communications and is going to be handling most of our program work as we grow, which is really exciting. And we're actually we're growing the team a lot right now, actually. So we're looking to hire a operations person who can handle our like finances and legal compliance and all sorts of things like that, as well as 2 or 3 different programs managers who can kind of be taking the kind of program structure that we've done in Malawi, and then doing that for a bunch of other target countries, so that if we can hand off that work, or then we can get more programs managers who can then scale to new countries and roll out this impact elsewhere. And yeah, if anyone's interested in kind of having a like a really direct role, then yeah, the more people we get to apply, we like the more talent we can find, the better. And I suspect we're going to be staffing up quite a bit over the next few years.
Okay, all you EAers out there. Yeah, it's interesting because I guess so many different people have different risk profiles, right? Like I'm so much more interested in risky things. So I'm like, as soon as Luke Freeman actually mentioned you first.
Great.
Yeah. Do they give you money? Giving what we can? Do they like?
They like I'm not 100% sure how giving what we can work. Like they as an organization haven't, but like perhaps people they've recommended to us have. It's I think they do awesome work there.
Yeah, they're incredible. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And what do you think is next on the horizon for you guys? I mean, so is it mostly lead paint that you're trying to eliminate from other countries, or and then turmeric as well? Is there anything else?
Well, turmeric is something that we're not. So at the moment, we're sure that lead is like a really massive problem, and we're really trying to like scale that up, get wins and change in as many countries as we possibly can. And ideally what we'll be looking for is to solve the lead problem globally, just like the world eradicated lead in gasoline. We want to do that for paint as well.
You know what I heard? I heard those fucking Cessna planes, those little ones, they use low lead paint still.
You know, I heard that as well in was that in that Vox? No, not Vox. The Veritasium video recently, maybe.
Well, an AI nerd today told me that because I was mentioning you. And why do you need to use those stupid planes? I mean, when I heard Cessna, I don't know anything about planes. I was like, is that one of the big ones? Maybe we really need it. But no, they're little zippy things that crash all the time. Can you just buy a different plane? Like, can we just decommission those fucking planes? I don't want lead in my air and my soil.
Yeah, that might be something for us to think about at some point as well. Yeah, but I think like one of Lucia's big tasks for the next 6 months is to be kind of looking at like what is the evidence for all the different like sources of exposure, and trying to figure out like there's just like not very good data about a lot of the sources. So if we can try and figure out like which of these sources matter most, figure out which one we like whether there are other ones that we should tackle as well.
You know, go on. Oh, I read it. Oh, you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I have this mushroom book that I just bought. It's on foraging mushrooms, and there are a bunch of wild mushrooms that I believe some of them like they just sap all the lead out of the soil, like that, and then you shouldn't eat them because they're a lot of heavy metals. I'm not sure if lead was one of them, but I do wonder if we want to revitalize the soil again, and I wonder if just mass planting mushrooms in fields would be it's kind of hard to plant mushrooms, but like I wonder if that would be a solution.
That's really interesting. I as I understand it, getting heavy metals out of soil is like super hard. So if there are ways like that like I'd be super interested to learn more about that. If you could give me the title of that book later, I'd be quite interested.
It's excellent. I want to hopefully interview the authors. It's a wild mushroom, a guide for foraging. It's great. It's all about Australian mushrooms and like how to identify them. I love it. I've been going on mushroom walks. It's awesome.
That's so cool.
I don't eat them. I'm not up to eating them yet, but I don't trust myself enough. But like, I'm so goal directed. Like, I love to go for walk, but usually I end up getting a coffee when I go for walks because I'm like a fucking animal. Like I just have to have a goal and go do something. But if it's mushroom walking, then my goal is to go and look for mushrooms. And so it's just like I get to go and forage and do things. Like I can't walk for no purpose. Oh, I do.
I agree. I think that sounds awesome. I'm a pretty keen like bird watcher. So if I can go out and be spotting like, oh, there's a like starling or something, then it makes my day. And this seems like the same thing, just with like just mushrooms.
Yeah, and you learn about the ecosystem as well because mushrooms like are usually found in very specific biome, like around trees. And so if you learn what the trees are, then you can figure out what mushrooms will grow there. And I assume there's a lot of similarities with that in birds. Like I assume birds are attracted to certain trees, and yeah.
There's a lot of difficulty in like identifying them, right? Because like I gather there are a lot that are quite similar, and like some that are quite similar are delicious, and some that are quite similar are like dead.
Yeah. It's really easy to fuck it up. Yeah, there are some mushrooms, like people say they forage field mushrooms, but actually there's like 3 different types of mushrooms that people think are field mushrooms, and sometimes like one of them is kind of poisonous. I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah, there's especially people coming from overseas who forage mushrooms, like very specific types of mushrooms, and then they come over here and they look kind of the same. They just go, oh, it's that type of mushroom, I always eat that, and then they eat it and get liver failure or whatever. So I'm at the stage now where I'm like picking up the mushrooms and like cutting them in half and like seeing how the gills attach to the stipe, the stem, because that's like a major identifying feature. And then you look at the gills and like the shape of the gills, all that different stuff. But I'm not putting anything in my mouth.
I think it's a good rule of thumb for Australia to just like assume everything is poisonous.
Yeah. Unless you really know, but yeah, it's best. Just don't put anything in your mouth and you're good. Although some mushroom foragers put them in their mouths because you can identify things by putting it on your tongue. So they don't eat them. Don't do this. Don't do this at all. But yeah, if you put it on your tongue, some of them like burn like battery acid on your tongue, and then you know what it is.
They used to be like this in like I was a scout growing up, and there used to be a thing that they in like the scout handbook that was like you'd rub it on your skin first, and if it didn't rash, then you'd like taste it, and if you taste it and there wasn't like any problem, then you go to the next thing.
Dude, no, some of them taste fine.
Yeah, or like I think it doesn't work that well, but I think it's the kind of thing where like in a survival scenario, if like you're gonna die otherwise,
don't eat mushrooms in a survival scenario.
That's probably a better call. Yeah, they should have put that in the book.
I reckon berries are less. I don't know. Don't take this. This is not foraging advice, but I think like I'd rather eat berries from a tree. I feel like I'll probably taste them more because some mushrooms that are poisonous taste perfectly fine.
I'll take that as advice and eat every berry I see.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's great. Yeah, I feel like your tongue. I feel like we're more attuned to vegetables. I don't know if that's true, and fruits. I forage a lot though. I do forage, not mushrooms, but I forage tons of stuff. Like I mean, you go around your local area and there's usually like 20 different plants that you can eat. I mean, in kind of any given area. Like it's kind of sad. I learned to start foraging when I was in my early 20s, and all of a sudden nature went from being vague green generic blobs to like very specific shapes and trees that I could identify. And it's amazing because the human brain is actually made specifically for this. Like a lot of our evolution is designed around how well can you distinguish that tree from that tree.
I wonder if that's why people are so good at like memorizing Pokemon, because it's kind of like that evolutionary skill set of like knowing every animal and plant in the environment and knowing whether it's dangerous for me or not.
That's so funny. Yeah. That's
like just on that note, you were saying there are a bunch of different like this might not be like good podcasting, but I personally am interested. You were saying there are like a bunch of different fruits around. I didn't know if like Australia would have many so many of our fruits. They've been like domesticated for like thousands of years to be like bigger and more delicious and stuff like that. Are there like delicious like stuff? Is there just delicious stuff growing around that like?
Yeah, you can eat lily pillies. They're the easiest ones to ID and like super good. They're like little pink berries. I mean, you can just look them up, but they're pretty easy. And then actually, they're not native, but Monstera deliciosa, they're everywhere. I think they're South American originally, but if you see a Monstera plant, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Deliciosa, and they have these. They're totally not good for agriculture because they have these long fruits, and the fruit it's hexagon shaped, which is a great shape, and it's like scales on it, and then over like a week or two the scales slowly fall off and then you can eat what's underneath, and so it's like not, and then also it stings you, it like stings your mouth, and you have to soak it in lemon juice if you don't want it to sting, but it's fine if you just let it sting you. But yeah, it's totally not made for like supermarkets, but it's fun.
The deliciosa, does it taste good?
It's delicious. Yeah, it's one of my favorite fruits. It's really good. Yeah, those are the best ones. And then pig face in near the beaches. Um, yeah, really, they only grow like for a very specific time in the summer, but they're these like red, bulbous, salty. It's like salty kiwi.
Huh.
Yeah, it's really good. A
I'd
lot
be
of
very
stuff.
keen. Yeah.
And I feel like it just puts. I'm more interested in my like I'm just noticing my environment a lot more. It's more. It puts me into the present. Like it's hard to be caught up in my thoughts when I'm looking all around at the world around me
Yeah.
and observing it.
Something quite nice about finding like new fruits and things like that as well. Like as like I think as a kid you have like so many new like experiences every single day, and it's really rare like once you're like 20 or 30 or something to be like, oh, I've never had a strawberry before.
Hmm.
Like that's really uncommon. So if there are a bunch of fruits that like we've never tried, it seems like a really fun thing to do. Yeah.
That's a good point too. We watched a documentary one time about it was about time
Mm.
and the perception that time. A lot of people say like as an adult, time goes by really quickly, which I also perceive. But that's a lot of that is due to milestones. So if because when you're a kid, you're constantly hitting milestones. You have so many new things that are happening to you, and so it seems like it passes by really slowly. But when you're an adult, you check into your job 9 to 5, and you kind of do the same thing over and over again, and time just like whizzes by because there's
Yeah.
nothing new going on. So new experiences. If you want time to go slower, like go do something new all the
I
time.
actually like in like I think about this so much, and like I try to like intentionally design my life with this in mind of like if you can be in like a couple of different locations in a year, it really like helps to like demarcate different parts of your time, or be like working on different things, or associate like music with certain places. It gives you like so many stronger memory anchors. There's a great book that talks about this, Moonwalking with Einstein. It's about the world memory champions, and how they like there are guys who can remember like they can go through an auditorium and remember every single person's phone number.
Mm.
And
Wow.
yeah, and it's about the techniques they use and how those can be like reverse engineered to have like a more fulfilling life. It's quite good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That was
I think
a lot more necessary before phones. But yeah, I'm sure it.
yeah,
Hmm. What were
I
you
think
gonna
this is why like COVID has like blurred time for a lot of people though. In that like if people are just kind of staying inside a lot of the time, we don't have as many like anchors and many new different experiences to kind of map to. So I think it's why for a lot of people it still kind of feels like 2020.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I started a new relationship. As soon as COVID started, I moved in with my partner Elliot.
That's
Yeah, and we also had just gotten together.
yeah,
So it was like this brand new relationship for 2 years. Yeah, it was fantastic. A lot of milestones.
awesome.
COVID also, a lot of people just. I mean, like you spent COVID pretty well. You you
Yeah,
started your charity.
yeah. I like I figure like yeah like I've got a lot better memories of COVID than I think most people do, just because like I've got like, oh, this is when I was in Zambia, or this is when I was in Malawi, and yeah, it was good. I figured like if I was gonna be like if I was gonna yeah, it was a pretty good time to start things, all things considered. Yeah,
A lot of my friends realized like how important it was to live life during COVID. I mean, I had a friend who she was just working all the time in her job, and then she suddenly started like planting a garden and um, just all these hobbies that she had never really done before. And like, I think a lot of people realize that money isn't the end of the world. Like, you can go and live with housemates, and it's okay, and you can earn a lot less money and just do the things you want to be doing, and
yeah,
that's way more important than that extra like whatever 20 or
yeah,
$30,000 a year.
yeah, yeah. It's true. I think it's weird. I think lockdown led a lot of people to think about how how they want to design their life, and what's important to them. And yeah,
Think a lot of us are going to be kind of I think it's a permanent change for a lot of people in terms of like, I mean, some people learned a hard lesson about finances and the importance of having savings. And
Mhm.
yeah, some people learn that their work isn't everything, and family is super important. And I don't know, I think it gave a lot of people time for introspection as well.
Yeah,
Hopefully it changes us for the better.
yeah.
Hmm. All right. I think I might wrap this podcast up.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this has been super fun. Thanks heaps for having me.
Yeah, I loved having you. This was packed with information. Like we we really compressed a lot in there. That was cool.
Hey, I'm glad. I'm glad it was fun. I had a lot of fun too. Yeah.
Just for a reminder, can you give everyone like your social media,
Yeah.
anywhere they can find you, your website?
Our website is leadelimination.org, where we've also got Facebook pages and things like that. Just chuck Lead Elimination in the search bar. And then myself, I'm Jack_Wondering on Twitter. So yeah.
Great. And check out Effective Altruism as well if you're interested at all in not wasting your money on shitty charities.
Yeah. And if you want to like give a shot at starting something yourself, then charityentrepreneurship.com is like search it up, see what you find out.
Yeah, they're doing an amazing thing for the world. Like, damn, shout out to charity entrepreneurship. Like they have an outsized impact to most charities, I would say.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's insane how talented all of those people are. And they're like, yeah, like I think this is something I've really updated on, of like if you want to do something, having a group of people around who are like kind of thinking about the same thing is just super useful. So yeah, if anyone wants to give it a shot, definitely find out about them.
I'm feeling a lot of optimism about the world, because there are like, a lot of people think the world's going to end in global warming and all this different stuff, but like there are so many super intelligent people like yourself who are just going out and actually making massive differences to the world, and it just fills me with optimism. So thank you for everything you've done.
I'm really happy to hear that. I think I think it's a good mindset to have, of world's pretty rough right now, but it's important to recognize that we have agency and that it doesn't have to be, and that there are big things that we can do for it. And yeah, we can make it better.
All right.
And thanks so much.
See you later.
Bye.